Alright, so you're getting into the new Augmentation Evoker specialization, and you're trying to understand a little bit more about Ebon Might and how the whole system works with Prescience, Shifting Sands, and all the other buffs that this character can give. To play this character at the top level, you need a deep understanding of how all the different buffs work and how they interact with each other to make sure you're getting the absolute maximum you can out of this class. So let's talk about the whole interactions that we can get. Sazaze. So really the start of controlling your buffs as this character is the Prescience buff. Putting this onto a target ensures that Ebon Might will always go onto that target. Any target you have affected with Prescience is going to get your Ebon Might buff as long as they're in range of the Ebon Might cast. And you didn't already apply Ebon Might to 4 other targets, not including that Prescience target. If you already have Ebon Might out, recasting it is just going to reapply it to all the targets that's already on. It will not select new targets. This will ensure that there's never kind of a desynchronization between the duration of your Ebon Might buffs that exist, so that you're constantly able to track them and keep them extended. If you don't have any applications of Ebon Might out, and there's no targets with your Prescience buff on them, Ebon Might is going to target the nearest DPS players on you that do not have Ebon Might from any target. This ensures that you aren't overwriting other Augmentation Evokers' Ebon Mights with your own. It's then going to go to non-DPS players, so after all the DPS nearby have Ebon Might from at least one Evoker, it's going to then prioritize non-DPS players, tanks, and healers. After that, it'll apply to a DPS player that does already have Ebon Might on it from a different Evoker. And then after that, it'll go on to non-DPS players that have the Ebon Might buff. Due to this interaction, I would recommend 1 to 2 Augmentation Evokers in a standard raid. I wouldn't really recommend higher than that because then the applications of Ebon Might start to get a little bit fuzzy, and it's a lot harder to control who's getting the buff, as well as how to control which Evoker is buffing which players with which version of Prescience. It's worth noting, Breath of Eons applies Ebon Might even if no targets have Ebon Might on them. So it'll extend it on your existing Ebon Might buff players, or it'll apply it to 4 players following the prioritization, making sure that somebody always has the buff when you have that Breath of Eons up. Shifting Sands is a buff we get from our Mastery, and this goes out in a similar kind of prioritization system. It's going to cast on the nearest DPS player that has Ebon Might active but does not have Shifting Sands. Then it's going to apply to non-DPS that have Ebon Might but no Shifting Sands. Next up is nearest DPS that don't have Shifting Sands or Ebon Might. Then non-DPS players that do not have Shifting Sands or Ebon Might. Then it's just going to prioritize one of the nearest DPS and reapply Shifting Sands to them. So with all these interactions, this is why it's always important to load up your Presciences on pull and get them onto the correct targets ahead of time, so that when you cast that first Ebon Might, it goes onto your proper targets. Then you immediately bust out that Tip the Scales Fire Breath, and that's going to apply Shifting Sands onto all of those Ebon Might buff people, and then you can do your Breath of Eons, and that's going to use the Shifting Sands Ebon Might buff players to do a massive burst of damage. Cast Time Skip to repeat all those steps, except Breath of Eons, that won't quite be up. I would really recommend setting up a weak aura for tracking your Prescience uptime. This is going to allow you to track which target you should be casting your Prescience on. You're also going to want to set up macros for targeting and casting on those specific targets. I can have links to some of those in the description below. I hope this helps you understand how to apply your buffs out as your Augmentation Evoker, and how to get the most out of your cooldowns and abilities to make sure your raid is successful. And we'll catch you guys next time.